Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you guys so much for the support that you guys have given me over this past week alone. It's been so overwhelming. It's been very overwhelming to see how many people have been backing me, how many people shared my stuff. I'm just going to do an update video on what's happened so far and how I'm feeling with everything that's been happening in the UK with regards to the Black Lives Matter movement that I spoke on in my last video. Following a viral tweet of mine, I was approached by someone who worked at BBC to be featured in an article which I shared on all of my social media platforms, and from then I started getting subscribers and followers and stuff, and I also was reached out to by someone who worked at BBC 5 Radio and BBC 1, also Channel 5. It's been very emotional, but at the same time I'm feeling so grateful that I can speak out about this issue, that I've actually been given the chance to speak out about these issues. More black people need to be given this opportunity. Even though I've been speaking out about something that's really close to my heart, I won't lie and say it hasn't been draining, and this goes for all of the other black people who've been using their platforms to speak out about what's been happening. Seeing us constantly vilified in the media and seeing us be harmed during these protests, with regards to the protests that are happening in the US and the force that the US police are using over there. I've personally been extremely tired. I'm still tired, but I really wanted to get this video out to show my appreciation to you guys that have been supporting me. I attended a protest yesterday and it was really good. The energy was really motivating and uplifting. It was very overwhelming to see people of all different backgrounds coming together to support a really important cause. But then I had to come home, and when I finally unwinded and took time to relax and debrief with myself, I had to come home to some disturbing YouTube comments that were left on my last video with regards to Black Lives Matter. I'm gonna read out to you some of the comments that was left on my page. They weren't necessarily abusive, but they were extremely dismissive and an attempt to twist the narrative that I spoke about in my video. So I'm going to address some of the comments. So someone said, "You say violence is often needed. Not sure that helps your cause really." When I spoke about violence sometimes being needed in my last video, I wasn't just talking about the looting and the rioting. I was talking about in the form of speaking out in political spaces, refusing to be silenced in political spaces, and hurting the pockets of exploitive white corporations. By rioting and looting places like Walmart, who fund the violent police, I believe that the message that is sent is very clear. That is an example of what I meant when I said violence is needed. I never said that I believe that black people should be violent towards white people for no particular reason. I never once said that. I would just like to dispel that narrative. Another comment was, "Ayram, you say that microaggressions are just as racist. However, many black people self-justify racial prejudice towards whites, or let's just call it racism, on the basis that names and insults aren't part of a system of oppression and institutionalized discrimination, and therefore they aren't racism. Do you agree with this, and do you see the blatant double standards here? Microaggressions by particular individuals are not examples of institutionalized racism, prejudice. So are they racism?" No, it's not racism. The basis of racism is power to oppress a race that is deemed inferior to the oppressive race, which in this case is white people. A black person insulting a white person is not going to affect them, because black people don't have the status and power in society to oppress white people. I'm not saying that it's okay for a black person to insult a white person. Once again, never said that in my video. It is not the same as being oppressed by a white person. At best, it is ignorant behavior. It's not racism, in my opinion, given the definition I have of racism. Someone else said, "I think all crime should be done through justice. Doesn't matter about color. No one should be dying. However, if they were criminal, hence the altercations with police, which I still don't agree with them dying, but on a personal note to you, the way you talk, you seem to have a problem with whites, so glad I watched this." I obviously don't have a problem with white people. I hate to play this card, but majority of my close friends are white and Asian. I don't have a problem with other people of other races. I'm fortunate enough to have friends who understand racism and have acknowledged it and addressed it. However, there are some white people who, for some reason, as soon as racism is addressed, it seems to be an issue that people have with white people. I don't have an issue with white people. I have an issue with injustice. I have an issue with racial bias. I have an issue with institutionalized racism. That is what I have a problem with. Someone else said, I'm white and I get racial abuse daily by a black colleague. Black people are often just as racist to white people. Once again, racism is on the basis of power. So a black person can't particularly be racist to a white person because, like I said, they don't possess the power or status in society to oppress a white person. However, once again, I don't agree that black people should be making ignorant comments towards white people, and I never mentioned that in my video. So someone else said, if Black Lives Matter so much, you should talk about what takes 92% of US black lives. It is other people, similar in London too. Get your own house in order. When talking about these statistics, it's important to note that proximity is very important. If black people live in an area where there is a lot of black people, the likelihood of them killing someone who is black is very likely. Same as in a white community, same as in an Asian community or any other non-black community. This narrative of black on black crime, again, it's a narrative that is pushed to further devise black people. It's also a narrative to further damage the image of black people in the media and in society. I'm going to talk about all of those comments as a whole and talk about why those comments don't make any sense to me. This is what systematic racism is. I'm going to explain what systematic racism looks like. Systematic racism is the fact that in both secondary schools I attended in my life, none of the higher positions were filled by black women or men. A lot of the known companies that I've worked for, the managers were not black. I never came across a black manager. I've been working since I was 16 and I'm 20 years old, so I find it extremely weird that, especially in this day and age and in London that is densely populated with black people, that none of my managers were black. A teacher I had in my old school recently applied for a higher position in that school, and this is a teacher with excellent credentials. Everyone in the school knows her for being such an amazing teacher, and she applied for a higher position in the school along with 4 other black candidates. She was shortlisted against 3 white candidates, and no surprise, a white candidate was accepted. Now you might think, well, maybe they were better, but the fact that there was 8 candidates that were shortlisted and only 3 of them were white and a white person still got the position, to me is what looks like systematic racism. Black people being denied the opportunity to fill positions of authority is what looks like systematic racism. Someone else in the comments also remarked that I should be focusing on issues in my community such as FGM. Those are the true evils. First of all, I'm still going to talk about racism. That is the current issue at hand. I've also made it clear that I will always be transparent and I will always address every single issue on my platform. However, the issue at hand is racism. I have never said that I won't or that I haven't spoken about FGM and other issues that affect my community. If you follow me on Twitter, I have actually spoken about this issue several times. Again, one particular theme that I keep seeing on social media is people trying to say that, well, what about when a black person is racist? I've already said plenty of times in this video, and I don't want to sound repetitive, but black people cannot be racist because they don't hold that status and power in society. They can be ignorant, and I never encourage anyone to make ignorant comments about anyone. I'm no longer educating white and non-black people about race, and this is why. I've mentioned before that a lot of my friends are black, white and Asian. I have friends from plenty of different backgrounds. Every single one of them, I'm fortunate enough that every single one of them understand race. They understand systematic racism. They understand institutionalized racism. They understand oppression. They understand racial bias. And they're my age. I've been friends with some of them for so long and they've been understanding it. They've been educating themselves on it. So I'm not going to educate grown people about why
racism is wrong, because disliking someone based on their skin colour is not something that needs to be explained. The protest I attended yesterday, there were plenty of signs held by white and Asian people that highlighted plenty of statistics about oppression. So the facts are out there, you just need to look for them. A lot of the people that claim that people need to be educated, some people don't want to be educated about race, so I'm not going to be a broken record and keep repeating myself to them. I shouldn't have to justify why treating one race like they are inferior is wrong. If you care about human rights, this is an issue you need to care about. I've heard a lot of people speaking about how we can move forward following the protests and the petitions and the emails that we've been sending out. So I'm just going to speak about personally what I plan to do in the future to tackle this issue. I plan to campaign for educational reform, whether that is visiting my old school, visiting schools in the borough, educating people in positions of power to change the education system in the UK that promotes institutionalized racism. I feel like we need to adopt a culture of accountability in the UK, and we can start off by letting it be known that Britain was never innocent with regards to the slave trade and all the other systems that were put in place to oppress and torture black people. This means teaching about it in history classes. I've noticed that all the years that I learned about history, Britain was always glorified in my lessons as a country who wanted to expand and conquer, as opposed to a country who actually contributed to colonialism and the slavery of black people. I'm a big believer in putting black people into positions of power so that we can also be the driving force for change. If we have a black prime minister, or if we have black members of parliament, we can help to have a black voice. As someone who isn't in a position of power, you might often think that you can't do anything, but there's no such thing as a small action. Even if it's something like speaking up, you might feel like you are the target of microaggressions in the workplace. Imagine if every single one of us did that in our places of work. They would be forced to listen. I know that it's hard to speak out about racial issues without feeling like you might be putting your job or your education on the line, and I sympathize, and I'm not forcing anyone to do that. At the end of the day, it is really hard growing up in a country that makes it clear that you are not one of them. So I don't blame anyone who does this, but this is for people who actively want to change the narrative. As a white person, what can you do? You can go back into your communities and you can speak up for what you think is right. I feel like this is so important, especially in a place where black people are made to feel like they are inferior. A white voice is often what's needed for the narratives to change and for change to actually come about. Refuse to be silent about things that you feel strongly about. If you see a colleague being racially abused in the workplace, or even on the street, you see someone being racially abused, speak up and say something. You can make these differences with your privilege. Be vocal. If you aren't vocal at this time, I'm going to look at you and just assume that you're just too far removed, that you don't care about people's human rights. If, as a white person, if you don't speak up at this time, like I said in my last video, I don't think now is the time to be passive anymore. For anyone that is taking my videos out of context, I have never once said that I want black people to be more powerful than any particular race. We want equality, which is not what we have right now. We don't want superiority. One last thing, on this channel, I will not tolerate racism in the comments. I won't tolerate homophobia, and I won't tolerate transphobia. I will never tolerate on this channel from anyone of any race, gender, sexual orientation, religion. I will never accept any of that on this channel. On that note, I'm going to stop this video here. Thank you so much for tuning in with me once again. Your support doesn't go unnoticed. I really love you guys so much. I really appreciate the confidence you guys have given me to speak up about these things, and I will see you guys in the next video.